Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, YIC members, and welcome to this evening's property selection webinar presented by YIC President Rob Wellings and Branch Manager Roger Galway. My name is Kai, and I'll be working in the background. Before I hand things over to Rob, I'd like to ask you if my audio is coming through clearly. If it is, could you please raise your hand by clicking the hand symbol on the GoToWebinar dashboard and let me know that everything's A-OK. Rochelle, Shane, Graham, I see those hands coming up. Thank you. If you would like to ask a question during tonight's presentation, please do so by typing in the questions box on the GoToWebinar dashboard. We may not be able to get to all the questions tonight, but over the coming days, Rob will respond back to you through email. If you are using voice over IP for your audio connection, I recommend that for best results, you close down any other online programs that you have running in the background, such as Skype, email, or YouTube. This also applies for other computers in your household. We also have 2 polls during tonight's presentation. I encourage you to participate in them. We're also recording this webinar, and all attendees tonight will receive a copy of the webinar via an email from GoToWebinar. And now at this point, I'd like to hand things over to Rob to get us started. Rob, over to you.
Thanks very much, Kai. I'm Rob Wellings, and tonight my co-presenter is Roger Galway. So we'll be questions tonight and going through and talking to Roger as well, because he's a wealth of knowledge. I've just popped a disclaimer up on the screen there, and that disclaimer, I'll let you guys all have a bit of a read through that so that you can let it sink in, and then we will kick into the webinar. Okay. So basically what I'd like to start out with is a quote from Adrian Hill. Now, Adrian's an accountant, and there goes my phone in the background, which is wonderful. So I do apologise for that. But Adrian's an accountant that was at this year's conference. So before you invest a single cent in property, or anywhere else for that matter, you need to invest in yourself. And I think that's really key to hear that, because that's why you're here tonight, is to get some learning under your belt before you kick into investing. So I'm going to do hand over to Kai just for a really quick poll before we get started.
So that poll is up and running right now. Do you have plans to purchase a property within 6 months, 12, 18, or never? If you could please indicate your results, and as soon as I see 80% of you voted, I'll shut things down and share them. Just waiting for a couple more. There we go. A bunch of you have just clicked in. Thank you very much. I'll close that and share the results. So Rob, 60% in the next 6 months, 40% next 12, 20% next 18 months or more. But everyone here is looking about buying property.
Oh, that's the right place to be then, I guess. That's what we want. Just so you've got that bit of passion about you, which is great. So I guess what I want to start out with is the typical plan for most people is they come along, they purchase a property, say they purchase it for $450,000, just pick that as a figure, and then they wait for the next 10 years because they bought their house, they're living in their house, and now their property is worth $900,000 because it's taken those 10 years to double. But then there's people out there that actually don't just want to have that one house. They want to have more. So instead of being that person who's bought their house, living in their house and doing the Aussie dream of getting your own home, then we've got the other option, which is using other people's money and using the equity to actually look at buying multiple properties. So what this is showing us here is that you bought your original property, and then when it's had a little bit of growth, you've started to use the equity to purchase 1, 2, 3 more properties. And as you've invested and bought more properties, through the plan, you're able to buy more property as you go. And that's the thing that the club's view is, they're using the equity and using other people's money to basically look at purchasing properties. So you're not sitting there in 10 years' time with just one property. You could be sitting there in 10 years' time with 4 properties, for example.
Rob, before we move on, can I just add something also over there? There's another option which we can look at is also we talk about using equity from a property. But then for a young investor, sometimes you could have cash saved up, or you could have your parents contribute to the deposit. So there's a couple of different options. So as a young investor, if you don't have your own home already, that's fine. There's different options. So don't think that you're out of the market if you don't have your own home. So just
that's great. Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that, Roger. So now we're going to head back to Roger very shortly. So I guess what do you look for when you're choosing a property? And I guess I want to throw that over to Roger so he can have a look at what members first focus on when they join the club.
Well, yeah, thanks for that, Rob. Yeah, most people when you look at properties, the first thing they look at is the price. Then they look at things like the rental yield. I know when I started looking, I wanted a property which had land on it, because they say land appreciates, and I'll talk about that in a moment. We talk about new or second-hand. People don't like to pay too much of money for a new property. They feel that they're more comfortable buying a second-hand property. Then we also look at units, and most people, they're more comfortable buying a property in their postcode where they live in, generally, because the reason for that is because of the fact that they live in that area, they know the area well, and that's why they're comfortable in that area. But there's more to it than what you have to look at when you're choosing a property.
Thanks, Roger. So what we've got next, for I suppose, and this will go a little bit more into depth as we go along. What should you look for when you're choosing a property? So what would you suggest to members for that, Roger? We try to keep it simple. Again, you look at it. There are 4 circles here, and what we look at is you look at your own borrowing capacity. The first thing you need to do is understand what your borrowing capacity, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Then you look at the price, what you can afford. Then you look at how much it's going to cost you you see how much money you have. So the price is based on also how much funds, how much of money you have to contribute towards the property, and then your holding costs. Those are the key fundamentals which you want to look at. Now, from here we'll go into a little more detail and go through each thing a little more in depth. Thanks, Roger. So I guess 5 key factors of property selection is looking for a capital growth. Now I did notice a question up there from Shane talking about the property bubble and can prices keep going up and can the market sustain it. I guess the thing is what we look at with the club is we're working on historical data. So with that being the case, those things can actually happen because we're looking at what's happened in the past, what will happen in the future. We also, with the club, we look at areas that have got growth in them as well, and that's what we primarily look at, so that we've actually got that capital growth in that particular area. That's why we're not buying and looking at buying properties in the back of beyond, because they will eventually double over time, but it will take a lot longer, and I guess that's what we have to look at, and that's why we have our research department. So it's a little bit off kilter there, but hopefully I've answered that question for you there, Shane. Our rental return, obviously, we need to know what's coming in from the rent, so we know what we can use to keep the property going forward. Attractiveness to tenants, and I'll talk about that, and I'll get Roger to talk about that soon, because you want to have an area that people are going to want to rent in. Then you've got your holding costs, so you know what things are costing you, and then obviously personal comfort levels. They're the sort of topics when we're looking at property selection that we really need to probably focus on. So talking about capital growth, I'd throw over to Roger. How do we choose a property that has the potential for growth?
Well, as it says on the screen, Rob, location, location, location. There is no 2 ways about this, okay? What we focus on is on a property which is going to be close to the city, because people want to rent close to the city, or where they want to rent close to work, okay? We look at where there's the infrastructure, where there's good railway networks, or the good bus lines, or good ferries. Those are things which we focus on, or highways. And also the other thing which we look at from a capital growth perspective is we tend to stay away from risky investments such as mining towns, regional towns. And the reason for that is because the risk involved is much higher. We tend to stay in the capital cities, and that also we are very careful on which capital cities we choose for that, because you want to look at capital cities which have a lot of industries, and it's not just totally dominant by one industry or one particular occupation. So that's what we look at. The other thing which we look at is we focus on where the banks are going to lend us the most amount of money and where the risk is less for the banks. So look at student accommodation, retirement units, and that sort of niche market, niche properties. We tend to stick to the general day-to-day properties, and you look at long-term leases. We tend to stay away from short-term rentals also.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Roger. Moving on, the next topic was rental return. So I guess why is rental return so important in selecting a property, Roger?
Well, the main reason why rental return is the most important, because the rent, one thing I want to tell you, you will never get wealthy on the rent. Okay? What the rent does is the rent helps you service your loan and service the mortgage which you've got on that particular property. So what we want to do is, and the rent basically covers 60 to 70% of of the property of your holding costs. Okay, so what that basically means is, if you have a property, you want it to be tenanted, so therefore you want to make sure that it's in a good area. What controls rent is population. What controls capital growth is population. So what we want to do is we want to get in areas where you're going to get a good rental return. Now again, you buy a property not just solely for the rent return. Just because it has a very high rent return need not be a good property. So what we look at is, because your capital growth is what is going to make you wealthy. So we look at a balance between the rental return and the capital growth.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Now moving on to attractiveness to tenants. So I guess how important is it to have a tenant in your property when property in mind, I guess, when you're selecting the process?
This is crucial. Having attractiveness to tenants is crucial when you buy an investment property. And the reason for that is because, as I said earlier, your tenant is going to pay 60% of your is going to be contributing 60% of your contributions to your holding costs. So it's very important to make sure that the property is attractive to tenants. What we mean by that is you need to make sure that it's close to the, as we said, close to transport, close to the shopping centers, close to where there's employment hubs, close to hospitals, close to major schools, and those sort of things. You also want to make sure that the property itself has got good security. It's got all the, not so much as bells and whistles, but it's a turnkey package. So where you have things like your blinds, your air conditioning, your window furnishings, you have security screens, because that's what attracts tenants. Because as a tenant, you want to move in there and you don't have to worry about trying to do all these things. So you want to make sure that you're comfortable with the property. So therefore, being an attractive proposition for tenants and where you're going to attract the best tenant is very, very important.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Roger. Now the big one, I guess, that a lot of people want to know, are the holding costs. So talk to us about the importance of knowing what your holding costs are, Roger.
Well, what is your holding cost? Just before we go into how to do that, the importance of it, what is your holding cost? Your holding cost is the difference between your expenses and your income. So basically your income is your rent and your expenses are all your interest, your rates, your body corporate fees and your management fees, your insurance and things like that. Okay, so what we talk about the holding cost is the difference between your income and your expenses. Now, why is it important? Because you want to make sure that you are contributing you don't have too much to contribute, because then it affects your cash flow and it affects your lifestyle, and you don't want that to happen. So yes, your holding cost depends on a lot of factors, things like your income and how much claim you can get back in your tax. But the bottom line is, the less holding costs you have, the better it is for you. Because when you have one property, it's all right. It depends. You can contribute $50 or $30 or $100. It doesn't matter the amount. But when you start multiplying that, and when you start building a portfolio, that makes a huge difference. And that's the reason, one of the things is, and we've got a cash flow analysis which we would highly recommend you to talk to your property mentor, and we can do one for every single property which we have. It's important to understand your holding costs, and the importance about that is that you need to see how much it's going to cost you, and whether you can afford to do that. And you'll be surprised at how little you have to contribute to holding your property. And it's important, the structure which has to be set up.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Roger. So I guess the other thing is that you have to be comfortable with what you're doing. So personal comfort levels are a big thing when you're jumping into property. It's like standing on the edge of a cliff. If you have someone there to hold your hand, that's got an abseil rope, obviously, before you step off, you're more comfortable to do that with them. So this is the idea, is knowing what you're comfortable in doing. A lot of people, what they do when they buy their first property is they postcode buy, because you know it's a good area, you buy in that area because that's what you're comfortable doing. But because people a lot of the times don't ask for advice or don't ask for that assistance, that's all they ever do. So you've got to make sure that you're comfortable and understand where you're trying to head. And comfort levels also, you don't want to go out and buy 15 houses. I mean, I do. But you've got to make sure you've got your comfort level there prepared for 15 houses. I know my wife doesn't look at any of the properties all under one bundle. She looks at all our properties individually. It makes her feel better. The end result is we've still got over $1 million worth of debt, but she looks at the fact that they're all individual properties. And that's the thing that she does to help with understanding and making her feel more comfortable about making the decisions and talking through the facts and figures. And I guess knowing your barriers as well. What are barriers that are there, comfort levels? Mum and Dad were a barrier for me for a lot of years. They turned around and said, you got to own your own home. That's what you need to do. That's the great Australian dream. Pay off your home, and that's what you do. And that's a mindset. So getting to know what the barriers are in front of you and trying to understand those is really so you're opening up your eyes to what's out there. Formulating a plan. Obviously, I didn't realise how powerful it was until I joined the club, I suppose, and they told me to write down my goals. So I wrote down my goals. Now, my wife had been doing this for years, and I just thought it was a load of hooey, but then I started to actually write down my goals, and when they're written down, they actually have a little bit more strength in them, and it's good, because then at that point you start to realise your goals. That's what I want to do. I want to formulate a plan to make those goals happen. And that'll just make it a little bit easier and make you feel a bit more comfortable when you're going forward. I guess, yeah, you're right, Roger.
Sorry, can I just add a couple of things about comfort levels, Rob? One of the things which I always say, your comfort level, how do you increase your comfort level, or how do you get comfortable with anything, is information. What I always tell people is, make sure that you get as much information about anything in life before you make a decision. So try and get as much information we're talking about investing in property. Well, try and look at all the different, try and get as much information and talk to people who have done it before. Don't talk to someone who doesn't have a clue about investing in property. And everyone, let me say, investing in property is the biggest barbecue subject which people can talk about. It's the most popular, okay? And everyone will talk about it, and everyone has an opinion. But talk to people who understand about property, and who are doing it themselves. And that's one of the things I like about the club, is because the club has people who are doing it. We are all investors ourselves first, and therefore then we start sharing that that information with other people. So that's what I would like to add to that.
Thanks, Roger. You stole my next slide, but that's okay. So obviously, with the club, we have experienced property mentors who are investors themselves, as Roger mentioned. There's a lot of free publications for the members out there that you can get access to. Again, educating yourself, attending workshops, webinars, as you're doing tonight, and getting along, just giving yourself that little bit more information. Each time you go, something else will click. And it took me a good 12 months of attending workshops before things started to click to me, and then it was like, oh, okay, well, now I understand that. We have a big list of members' benefits as well, and we've got this unique circle of safety, which is you've got this such a big support network out there of investors that can actually help you with those sort of things, and access to club brokers. So there's a lot of different things there that how we can help to get you guys educated. So now I've got another quick poll, which I'm going to throw over to Kai quickly for.
Okay, Rod, that poll is up and running. So when did you last log into your member profile in MemberLink? We have never, last 6 months, last 12 months, or 12 months plus. And 92% of the people voted, so we'll close that down. And 27% of the people said never, 55% in the last 6 months, 18% in the last 12 months, and that's that.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Kai.
Over to you.
I guess the thing is why it's good to take these polls is because then we know, you know, are you even aware that we actually have a members login in our website that you can get in there into MemberLink, and you can have a look at those sort of things and see what information is there and how much information we do talk about. And I will segue from there. These are the sort of things that you actually do see, and I'll hand over to you, Roger. Basically, this is just a snapshot so you guys can have a bit of a look about the information. This is only one page of quite a large document, and we've just particularly picked one property, but this could vary in price, could be too high for your price point, but we have other properties that are lower than that. We have other properties that are higher than that, so there's definitely things there. And I guess I'll get Roger to have a quick chat about the different things that are in a profile.
Yeah, one of thanks, Rob. One of the major things which I like about the club is that you get all this information, and we provide as investors we are provided all this information. Things like we've got properties from $250,000 or $280,000 right up to $800,000, $900,000. So we have a range of properties, and what that basically does is these profiles, they give you all the details about that property. Now, if you go to a real estate agent, you get a A4 size of paper with a photograph and a couple of dot points about that particular property, and then you got to go and have a look at it. Whereas here, you've got like 30 pages long of all the different information about things like where the property is located, what it's made of, what are the inclusions. It also has a location appraisal of where the property is, of the suburb of where the property is, the state, what's the infrastructure around it. Then it also has, as you can see, there are links over here which take you to the site plans, floor plans. We have rent appraisals. We have our special conditions, which is exclusive to the club. We have photographs, and also we'll talk a little bit about the star report. So we've got all these links, and so you as an investor or as a potential investor have all this information up front before you even think looking about wanting to purchase a property. So, and every property the club has a profile attached to it. So you've got plenty of information over there to have a look at. And again, this is where your property mentor comes into play, and your property mentor becomes your friend, because you need to spend a bit of time with your property mentor explaining what you're trying to look for and what you intend to look for, and discuss with them, and then work out a plan on moving forward from here.
Okay, thanks, Roger. You did mention the STAR report, so would you like to tell us a little bit more about the STAR report, which is one of the links that was actually on that profile?
Yep. Now, the STAR report, the STAR report is a report which has been formulated by the branch managers, by the researchers, and what we do is every week we get together as a network, and we basically critique these properties, and we have a whole range of different categories, and we look at those properties, and then we go through the property. So we'll take a property, for example, we take the property in Kedron, and we look at it. We look at what's the style of it, the construction. We look at where the position is. We look at shopping. We look at transport. We look at the cost of the property. Then we look at what amenities are around. So there's a whole raft of information which we do, and then we rate them. So we rate them based on from 1 to 5 stars, and we give them a star rating. And then at the end of the day, at the end of that, we work out. We take the 10 criteria, and then we add that up, and we get a star rating. So. And we are doing that as property mentors and branch managers. And what that basically does is, and I always look at it, if I'm going to buy that property, what am I looking for in that property? So it's a very valuable tool to use along with the profiles.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Roger. Now, I did notice a question up there, but I might wait until the end, Sachin, just so we can, I'll get Roger to talk about the question at the end, but I'll keep going. Now, how we list the properties in the STAR report, that's what was just talked about there with Roger, is that all the properties get a star rating, and as we go through, these criteria get looked at, and they get allocated a star from those actual meetings that they get together and talk about the properties, and they give them allocations. Now, this is the STAR report and the property assessment of what we look at, and we don't list properties on our stock list unless they're quite a good quality and really up there on our STAR reports. Oh, I've just lost my mouse. There we go. I've got it back. Now, I guess the other thing that people want to know, and that was what we talked about before a little bit with the holding costs, is how do we work all that out? So I've thrown up there on the screen at the moment a sample of a cash analysis, and what that is telling us what do we use the cap for, I guess, and for Roger, I guess, if he wants to go through and explain to us what that all means, as you're looking at it right now, it just looks like a chart on a board. But Roger, if you can explain a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Well, it's what I like about this about the cash flow analysis in this particular diagram is how easy it is to look at. And see, don't get worried about all the different numbers over there. The crucial thing is we put down your information. So we put down your income, we put down what the cost of the property, and if you're going to put a deposit, what the interest rate is, and your we work it out. Okay. Now, just looking at this particular chart, you look at the numbers. Now, the numbers there are 5 numbers which you need to worry about. The first one is in red, and that's your outgoings. So your total outgoings in this particular instance is $506 a week. Okay, so that's what's outgoing. Now, what are the things which are outgoing? As we discussed, it's your interest, it's your rates, your body corporates, your management fees, your insurance. So that's what covers all your outgoings. So you're spending that money. Okay, it's costing you. Now, how is that is countered by your income? So what is your income? Your biggest income is your rent, as you can see. Now that's $356. So in this example, your outgoings are $506. Your income is $356 from your rent. Okay. Now, for me, another crucial thing which a lot of people don't know about is your tax savings, and that's one of the reasons why we recommend properties based a lot of times on new properties. So you can get back about $115 in this example from your tax per week. Okay, and then. So therefore, if you add those two together, so your income is $470. Okay. So therefore, your shortfall is only $35. So you can see the shortfall is the smallest amount which you have to contribute. So in this example, your holding costs are $35 a week. Okay. Now again, we have taken a lot of assumptions over here. I did a cash flow for one of my members this morning, and it was costing them $4 a week. So I asked them, can you afford $4 a week? And they said, well, we stopped having one coffee extra per day. And I said, well, there you go. I said, you don't even need to do that per day. You need to do that per week. So therefore, that's what you're going to look at. And this is where your property mentor will play a major part in this, because he or she is able to do a cash flow analysis for any property which is there. Now, the other part, the black bar graph over there, the bar in the graph, shows $616. What that basically means is we are taking, and based on historical information, we are taking that this property is going to double after 10 years. Now, we can take it after 12 years or 15 years. It really doesn't matter. But let's say in 10 years. So what we are saying is this property is $445,000. In 10 years, it will be $890,000. So what that means is if you take $890,000, divide that by 10 years, and then divide that by 52 weeks in that period. So it's divide 890,000 by 520 weeks, it comes to $616. So basically, you are contributing $35 to that property, and it's growing by an average of $616 per week. That's basically what this graph means.
Wonderful.
Okay, and again, we're more than happy to discuss this and again, it's important to sit with your property mentor and go through this yourself for your scenario, because each one scenario is going to be different.
Now, we did have a question come in there, which is great, because we've just got to question time, which is wonderful, from Shane, and we just mentioned there that you should have a property mentor. So everybody who actually joins as a member is allocated a property mentor, and they are the ones that normally get in contact with you and let you know about webinars and so forth. If you don't have a property mentor at the moment, then we'll talk to you, and I can touch base with you and let you know if you actually do have a property mentor, and we'll put you in touch with them, or if you don't, then we can look at allocating a property mentor in your state just to make it a bit easier for you. Someone who's close by sometimes is easier to contact, whereas because we do a lot these days, it doesn't really matter. It really comes down to your comfort levels, and there are a lot of experienced investors through the club, and that's the ones that have moved on to become mentors. So Shane, hopefully that answers your question, but if I'll hang back at the end there and be in contact with you just to give a bit more information about that anyway. Roger, there was a second question that came up there, and hopefully you can help me out here, from Sachin. How do you live on your property during retirement is one of the questions that's been asked. It says they're 32 years of age, and they bought their property for $195,000 in Waterford West, and they want to know how do we retire on these properties? Okay. Very good question, Sachin. Thanks for asking that question. Now, again, we'll need a whole different webinar to talk about this, but very quickly, in a nutshell, how it works basically is you build a portfolio of properties, and then you draw down the equity from each property. So you sit on that property for a while. So, for example, in your situation, you buy a property for $195,000. So, say, for example, you're looking at what you call retiring, I don't know, in say 20 years, for example. Okay, you're 32. So say you work till you're 52, for example. So in 20 years, if you look at the doubling cycle in this property, your $195,000 property will be worth 380 plus 760,000 in 20 years. Okay, so but your loan still remains at 195,000. So what the difference between your loan and the value of the property is your equity. So you'll have say $400,000 equity. I'm just using round numbers. So now you can draw down on that equity. And again, I'm not going to go into the details about that, but I can assure you that you can draw down on the equity. Okay, and based on your loan to value ratio, again, talk to your property mentor about this, and they will be able to explain this to you on a one-on-one basis. But you can draw down on that. So now, having one property is not going to solve your problem, and this is where
building a portfolio of properties over a period of time. So what I would suggest is you accumulate your properties over a period of time. So maybe in the next 10 years, then you sit on it for the 10 years for it to grow. You consolidate your position, and then you can harvest the equity on your in your property. Okay, so there are ways, and it is a process, and I would really recommend you sitting down with your property mentor and going through the process with them.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Roger. And that brings us to the next part, what to do next. So talking with your property mentor, obviously that's key, because that's where it all starts, and that's where your information, apart from tonight, obviously, will come from. And then what you get to do is confirm your borrowing capacity. So on the actual handouts that we've set up tonight, we actually have a financial wealth check form on there. If you get that completed back to your property mentor, you've got an idea of what your borrowing capacity is, and then you've got an idea that if they come back and say you can only borrow $100,000, then you have to look at saving a bit more, putting in together a plan, and then you can set your plan up based on what your borrowing capacity might actually be. Ask lots of questions. That's a must, and which you've asked a few tonight, which is great. And then come along to any of our events that we actually have running. We try to run them in all the states so that we can get everyone involved. We don't want to just say, just because Queensland's fantastic, we don't want everyone just to come to Queensland events. So, because Roger would probably disagree since he's down in Melbourne. Join our webinar series, because we have a lot of information on there, and follow us on social media. Now, excuse me.
Sorry,
Yep.
Rob, can I just add something about, just if you go back to that previous slide, I want to bring something to people's attention. And as you can see, you're climbing up a few steps, and you can see there's a lot of steps in there. This is a journey. This is a what you call journey, and it's not going to happen overnight. You have to plan this, and you have to work with this over a period of time. It's not going to happen overnight. So just think of it as a journey and work towards your goals, work towards your end goal, and then you climb up the ladder as you go along. And this is where we as a club, we are there guiding you, we are standing beside you, and we are walking beside you through this journey. And that's what I take away from this as a member. For me, I've got the support of the club, and I would highly recommend you using the club as your support network in climbing up the ladder.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Roger. My wife's just walked back in, and she's asked me if I want a drink of water because I'm a bit parched. So, okay. So obviously, we want to contact us. You can contact us through the Young Investors, as on the Young Investors Ambassador at yic@propertyclub.com.au, which is up there on the board. You can also contact through Louise Wellings. Now, that's actually myself now. I know I don't look like a Louise, but you never know. If a bit of a growth in hair, maybe I will.
Sometimes he acts like one.
Yes, well, this is true, Roger. Thank you for that vote of support. You can message us on Facebook, and you can also obviously contact us through our website, and we can get in touch with you through your mentor as well. So, we have lots of upcoming events, so it's always good to follow us on social media, because that event could be close to where you are. Instead of you seeing an event that's sitting down in Victoria and you're sitting in WA and, oh, when's my next event? If you follow us on social media, you can actually get information, and we do send out information on a regular basis about our up-and-coming young investor events. We also try to send out information about any property club events that are coming up. So we actually have our national workshops that are running around the country at the moment. So if they're in your state, by all means, get yourself along to that. If you jump onto the Property Club website, or just look it up on www.propertyclub.com.au/lifestyle, that'll give you a bit of an idea of what we're doing around the country at the moment. So, Roger, do you have anything to add at this point?
No, I think it's good. Give it. What I would suggest is don't overanalyze stuff. You know, we talk about understanding stuff and learning about it, but don't overanalyze it, because sometimes overanalysis leads to paralysis. Look at it and then go for it, because I'll tell you what, and we've got thousands of people who are doing it. You're not alone in this journey. You have the support of the club, and highly recommended. And yeah, come and join us, and hopefully we'll catch up with you guys in the near future.
Thanks very much, Roger, and thanks very much, Kai, for tonight. I'd like to thank everyone for coming along tonight, and because I'm a big fan of going and having a nice glass of red or a beer or a water, if that's the way you're inclined, that's why I try to wrap these things up early, because I don't want to take too much of your time, guys. But if anyone's got any questions that I haven't answered, then by all means throw them up in the question pod. I'll hang around for a couple of minutes and I'll try and message those through to you. But I do see one that I've got up there at the moment. What do funds to complete mean? So, Roger, what are funds to complete? Because people have asked that question.
Okay, very, very good question, and I'm sorry if I didn't make myself clear. Funds to complete is basically when you have a property. So, for example, you look at a $350,000 property. Okay, I'm just picking it. Or let's take a $400,000 property. Now, generally, the banks will lend you 80 to 90% of the value of that property. Now, for example, let's take a 90% lend. So, if you borrow 90% of the value of the property, so the value of the property is $400,000, you need another $15,000 to $20,000 of costs. Now, that's your stamp duty and your solicitor's fees. So, you need a total of $420,000. What that basically means, is you have $420,000 to come up with. The bank will lend you $360,000, which is 90% of the $400,000. You've got to come up with $60,000. Now that is your funds to complete. That $60,000 which you have to contribute is where you have to that's your funds to complete. Okay, I hope that makes sense.
Fantastic. And if that doesn't make sense, then you've always got your property mentor to sit there and talk through that with. But that's basically the idea. Is it's what it's going to be, what you've got to come up with, because the bank won't pay everything, unfortunately. We'll work out how to do that. That'll be a fantastic day. Now, how do you find out your borrowing capacity? I did touch on this earlier, that we actually had that in the handouts, the financial excuse me, the financial wealth check form. So that's a good way to get that completed back to your property mentor, and they'll forward that on to a broker, and they'll have a look at what that actually is going to cost, what your borrowing capacity is, so then you know exactly where you do sit. Okay, and then I've got one other question that's popped up. I can't remember my logon and details for the member link. So if you don't know what your logon details are, then you can request that through from your property mentor, or you can shoot me a message tonight and I can find that information out to you and send that through. Now, as I mentioned before, unless Roger's got something to add or Kai's got something to add, I'd like to say thank you very much for coming along tonight, and I hope you got something out of tonight, and just a little bit of education along the way. And if you can do that, then you'll be more comfortable, you'll get your comfort zones up, and then you'll step forward and look at jumping into the wonderful world of buying property. And the hardest thing you'll find once you start buying property is, how do you stop? So good luck on your journey, guys. Thanks very much.
Good night.
Thank you, Rob and Roger. I'll leave the webinar running for a couple more minutes. This is your last chance to shoot either of our presenters a quick question. They'll receive that in a report later on tonight and respond back to you through email. So have a great night, everyone, and thank you once again for coming along. Bye-bye.